Someday. Well, when we've got guys like Trey Riddle and Ed Lehrberger in Colorado doing so much with the fiber side and the composite side and the plastic side, it'll be here eventually. Well, thanks to Mia and to Susie and Cooper Union for hosting such a great event. Thanks for everybody coming out here. We really appreciate it. And thanks to the panelists, besides myself. It's great to be on the stage with these guys. I'm going to start off with just a little background so you know a bit about me and how I came to this journey to get into hemp. I was born in Liberal, Kansas, which is actually about an hour from the Laughlin farm, which is pretty interesting because Ryan's the first hemp farmer that I met, and I got to participate in a hemp harvest of his a couple years ago. But I moved to Loveland when I was age 1, and I grew up in a musical family and a sports family, and from there, I went to Colorado State University, and I went to a place called the Music Business Institute in Atlanta, and I started to work for a company called Handelman Company, which is a large music and video wholesaler, rack jobber, and they service Kmart's and Walmart's and Sears and Montgomery Ward's and all these big box retailers with media products such as CDs, vinyl albums back in the 80s, cassettes, software, and books. And in 1991, I moved to California, and I was promoted to the district manager position and covered the whole West Coast for Handelman Company, traveled up and down the coast. And in 1995, I moved back to Colorado and started my own music production company, record label, doing CD manufacturing, packaging, distribution, music licensing, and events. And when I moved back to Colorado, there was a store in Fort Collins called the Emperor's New Clothes that I started hanging out at, and a friend of mine owned it. Her name was Carolina Westers, and that's where I got introduced to industrial hemp and the entire kind of cannabis movement. And at that time, I got to read this book by this guy named Jack Herer. It's called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and this has really become kind of the Bible of the hemp industry, and it really inspired advocates from around the country and from around the globe. And if you have not read this book or seen this book, I highly encourage you to get it, because there's a lot of great information in here, historical information about how we got to prohibition in the 30s and the whole conspiracy theory, and whether all of that is true or not really doesn't matter at this point in time, because a lot of it really is true. And again, I highly recommend that you pick up this book. And so in the early 90s or the mid 90s when I had moved back and I got educated, I was running my company doing the music business thing. And I continued to do that, and I wasn't really involved in the hemp industry up until 2012 when, well, I should say, the music industry itself really came crashing down between like 2005 and 2010. And being in the media manufacturing business, digital outlets like Napster, peer-to-peer file sharing sites, Amazon, iTunes, all of that killed the CD business, which for me was my revenue stream. And at this point in time, you know, it really was like a come to Jesus moment for me. It's like, what the hell am I doing? What am I gonna do? And so I reflected back on my time going back to the late 80s and early 90s at Handelman Company, where when I went into accounts, we had book accounts, and I would literally go in there and I would strip thousands of covers off of books. And I would take these books and I'd go out back and I'd throw them into the dumpster. And then I'd hand all these covers to the department manager, and they would return these and they would get credit for the books. And so I'm just one guy that had stripped thousands and thousands and thousands of books. And do we have that first slide? So imagine me multiplied by thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing this. And so it's like, man, what a waste. We're just throwing all this stuff into landfills. And not only that, you know, as I moved on and I had my own company, Happy Scratch Records, literally hundreds to thousands of small independent companies and large companies, when the CD business came crashing down, do you know what we did with all those CD jewel cases and CDs? we threw it right into there. So for me, this is kind of like repentance to like, hey, I really need to start taking care of Mother Earth, you know, and it really was like a come to Jesus moment for me. So at that point in time, it so happened that Amendment 64, which was the bill that was introduced in 2012 in Colorado to legalize marijuana and tax it and regulate it like alcohol, came up. There was a clause in there that would allow industrial hemp to be farmed in Colorado, and it's like, well, that's cool. I owned hemp clothing and hemp hats, and it's like, I'm going to start myself a hemp merchandise company. And then I got involved with the movement. There's a guy named Mason Tvert, who's one of the main guys with the Marijuana Policy Project, who was really the driving force, him and a gal named Betty Altworth. And I reached out to them and was like, hey, I want to become involved with this campaign. I believe that marijuana should be, legal. It should not be illegal. We should not be putting people in prison because they choose to use a substance that is far less dangerous than alcohol, far less dangerous than prescription medications. We've got a crop here that our farmers have not been able to grow that's really the most beneficial, multifunctional, nutritional, industrial, and environmental crop on the planet. And yet we're putting thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of people in prison and destroying lives because of these policies that are built on misinformation, propaganda. And, it's like being part of this campaign and seeing it go through to fruition and seeing it pass that, hey, now we can actually have legal cannabis in Colorado and not put people in prison and not waste all these tax dollars and destroy all these lives. I mean, literally, what we've been doing as a country, we've got the DEA, who, to me, is one of the greatest terror organizations in the history of mankind. We can talk about ISIS, we can talk about our Al-Qaeda and all of that, and yeah, you get crazy lunatic religious nuts that chop people's heads off, but here on our homeland, we have been funding, the most destructive agency, terror organization ourselves. We're responsible. So, I don't want to go off on the marijuana thing because I really am a hemp guy, and I'm not fighting that marijuana battle. There's a ton of those people that are fighting that. So after Amendment 64 passed, I started a company called Colorado Hemp Company in March of 2012. So literally right now, we're celebrating the 4-year anniversary of Colorado Hemp Company. And thank you. I'm glad to be doing it here in New York. And I'm glad that New York is going to be growing hemp. Even if it's on the small pilot scale, it is a start and there's a long ways to go, but thank you, Donna, for everything that you've done for this state. And, we need a Donna in every state across the country. We really do. And so I started off doing t-shirts and hats and kind of the merchandise thing that I'd been doing as a music business. And then I got interested in hemp paper and trying to find hemp paper and that's available, that's commercial grade. It's very, very limited. And I found a company out of California that was making a hemp paper called Greenfield Paper Company. And so I partnered with them and got the available paper stocks that they were making and started doing business cards and limited edition posters and some packaging and brochures and that sort of thing. And I've been testing it on a variety of printing machines and developing that process because I do have a commercial printing background from, my 20 years in the music business. And so that became treefreehemp.com, which I'm still doing, and we're still working on a variety of paper developments. And I actually just got some fiber from Trey here about a month ago, and we're testing that out to do some hand batch stuff. And hopefully this year we'll be making paper with domestic fiber rather than having to import from Canada or import from the UK, because it just has not been available here. We haven't had the processing, and we obviously haven't had the seed in the ground and the acres to be able to do this. But we are at that point today, and hopefully with Trey's technology and my buddy Ed Lehrberger, who I'll be talking about here in a second, we'll be able to get there. In 2014, I launched the first NOCO Hemp Expo. So I have an event background, and what had been going on in Colorado had been little gatherings, kind of like this. They'd be in library conference rooms, and people get together and talk about, all the uses of hemp and the education and all that sort of thing. And I wanted to kind of expand on that. And so a friend of mine owned a club in Windsor, Colorado, held like 330 people. We sold it out. We had probably 20 vendors, half a dozen speakers, including Ryan, who was there. And it was a really good event. We had hemp food. We had hemp beer, which I made the first Colorado hemp beer, partnered with a local brewery, and I used Ryan's crop from 2013 to put in there, and we used the flower. And I don't know if you've ever had hemp beer before, but if you have, like Humboldt hemp beer from California, they use the seed that they get from Canada. And really, when it comes to making hemp beer, the flower is the way to go. I mean, hemp's in the same genus as hops is, and they've been doing extraction technology with the hops for decades. So it's really exciting to see what the possibilities are going to be with hemp beer and hemp beverages coming down the road. So also at that first 2014 event, let me see where we go here. Nope, that's not it. There we go. So I met this guy named Doug Fine. He was releasing a book called Hempbound. And does anybody here know who Doug is, or has anybody read this book, Hempbound? This is another book that I highly recommend belongs in your reading repertoire, because Doug is kind of a modern-day Jack Hare, and he's a wealth of knowledge. He's traveled the country, he's traveled the world, and lots of farms, and he's really on the front lines right now of educating people, all the uses, all the different legislation, and he's just a tremendous advocate for what's going on with hemp right now. And then last year, 2015, we did this event again, and we moved it to a larger facility called the Ranch Events Complex in Loveland, and we had over 70 vendors, all hemp-centric vendors, and we had over 1,250 attendees. So we really grew the thing by 4 times last year. And it was, again, it was tremendous to see so many people that are jumping into the hemp industry, that are creating hemp products, whether they're body care products or CBD, topicals, food products, apparel products, getting together, sharing their knowledge, interacting with the general consumer, interacting with each other and building business relationships. There was just so many great things that came out from this particular event that hopefully this year, which is coming up in a couple weeks, everybody's going to attend. But I want to talk about a couple relationships. Here's a couple more slides. And this is actually Ryan here with his crop, some of these that Doug took. This first legal harvest, I'm going to talk about this here. Well, I'll go ahead and talk about this right now, because we're going to go into this right here, first legal harvest. This is a 28-page monograph that I had this custom 80-pound text paper created. It's a 25% hemp blend with 75% post-consumer. It is tree-free, although there could be secondary elements of tree in there, but there is no virgin wood pulp in there. And we really can move towards this model of reducing the amount of wood pulp that we put into paper. We don't need to have these tree farms that have destroyed local ecosystems. We don't need to be using trees for paper to the extent that we have over the last 100 years. But unfortunately, the timber industry is similar to the fossil fuel industry in that it's got a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of jobs that it provides. And obviously that's something that we have to consider. We don't want to take jobs out of the economy when we want to grow the economy, or at least make a transfer of jobs. So there is the opportunity to replace a lot of this wood pulp with either a hemp pulp or flax or some of these other ag crops that we can grow up every year, rather than taking trees that take 8 to 12 years on these tree farms to chop down. And again, they just destroy such large parts of the local ecosystems. Nothing will live there. So during the expo last year, there was a couple really key relationships for me that came out of this. And one is PureVision and PureHemp technology. There's a gentleman named Ed Lehrberger that's had a biorefinery in Fort Lupton, Colorado. And they have what's called a countercurrent reactor. And what this does, and they've been testing various feedstocks for the last 20 years, whether that's wheat, corn stover, and a variety of other feedstocks. And what it does is it separates out the pulps and the lignins and the sugars. And they've been testing industrial hemp for the last year now, and they're having some really positive results on the data that they're generating. And here's some of the different materials or the different products, the raw materials that can go into a variety of different products are listed up here. So, again, it's similar to some of the outlets that Trey is going into, but it's a different technology. I mean, with sugars, you've got the beverage industry, you've got bioplastics, lignins, you can make bioplastics as well, and various specialty products. The fiber obviously can go into papers, pulps, building materials, and this technology, this wet processing, has really yet to be done with industrial hemp. So I think that there's tremendous potential in this. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this develops, and I'm really looking forward to seeing when Ed Lehrberger and Trey Riddle get together and start talking about the possibilities of dry and wet processing opportunities together. Another relationship that came out of this event was one with a guy named Sean Murphy, who created the Hemp Business Journal, which just released its first issue. And we got to print this. It's got a hemp cover on it. We are trying to do as much hemp printing as possible. And what the Hemp Business Journal does is it provides data, market intelligence, and strategic information for businesses and investors. And I was asked to be on their advisory board, and the first issue, like I said, has been currently released. And what this shows here is it shows where the market has been and where it's projected to go. And by 2020, it's projected that we're going to have a $1.5 billion industrial hemp industry here in the United States. And personally, I think that those numbers are a little bit short. I think that we can definitely blow those numbers away, and that all depends on how our government reacts and what kind of regulations we can get in place, and if we can finally get this crop to be treated like corn or soy or wheat. So let's hope so, because there's tremendous future for states all across America and for this country, and to become an exporter instead of the largest importer on the planet. And last, I'd like to leave by inviting everybody here to NOCO 3, the largest hemp expo on the planet, happening here on April 1st and 2nd. We've already got the vendor spaces sold out. We've got over 100 vendors and exhibitors. We've got over 70 speakers and participants that are going to be educating, talking hemp. But the expo has many goals. More than anything, it's about education and awareness, and letting consumers know that they hold the key, and that key is to vote with their pocketbooks. If consumers want it, businesses are going to listen. So to all of you, if you can allocate some of your discretionary spending to switch over from non-hemp products to a hemp-based alternative, whether that's food, body care, clothing, or even pet products, in the end, that can make the difference whether hemp wins or whether hemp loses. And so I vote for hemp winning. Thank you, guys.